Hey everyone, and welcome back. Are you ready to dive into some space sim news with me today?
Always ready to blast off.
Today we're taking a deep dive into episode 498 of the Guard Frequency podcast. They cover a bunch of games, but we're mainly focusing on Elite Dangerous, Star Citizen, and Star Wars Outlaws, since that's what a lot of you wanted to hear about.
Sounds like a solid lineup.
Yeah.
This episode had some interesting stuff going on, especially with Elite Dangerous, about to celebrate a pretty big anniversary.
Oh, yeah, that's right. 10 years of Elite Dangerous.
Yeah.
10 years. It's crazy to think about, isn't it?
It really is.
Makes you feel kind of old when you remember when it first came out, you know?
I hear that.
So naturally, everyone's buzzing about what Frontier might do to mark the occasion. Some people are even hoping for a free Sidewinder. Can you imagine?
Haha. Wouldn't that be something?
I know, right? Although the podcast did mention that the recent financial reports for Elite Dangerous weren't exactly stellar. They used the term meh to describe it.
Meh? Huh. Well, that doesn't sound too promising for our free Sidewinder dreams.
Maybe not, but hey, a spacefarer can dream, right?
Always. Though even without a free ship, I'm sure Frontier has some tricks up their sleeve. They have to, right? I mean, 10 years is a big deal.
For sure. And the podcast hosts seemed to think so too. They were speculating that Frontier needs to do something big to re-energize the player base.
Definitely. I mean, I remember when Elite Dangerous first came out, that grind for your first ship upgrade, man, that felt like a real accomplishment.
Oh, absolutely. And that's something we see in a lot of these successful space sims, that sense of progression, of really earning your place in the galaxy.
It's addictive. And it'll be interesting to see how Frontier tries to recapture that magic with this anniversary update.
Agreed.
Speaking of updates, let's shift gears to Star Citizen, because it sounds like they're actually making some headway with this whole server meshing thing.
It does seem like they're making progress, yes.
So for those of us who don't speak fluent tech, what does server meshing even mean? And more importantly, is it going to work?
Basically, it's their attempt to create one massive, seamless universe by connecting a bunch of servers together.
Ambitious, and
Incredibly ambitious.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking Star Citizen here.
Yeah.
So naturally, there are a few caveats.
Naturally. The podcast hosts said it's still early days, and while they called it a success, they also emphasized that there's a long way to go before it's truly stable. So the million credit question, is this the game changer they've been promising for years, or just another wait-and-see moment in a long line of them?
Right. It's Star Citizen, so there's always that element of cautious optimism.
Oh,
I don't think anyone on the podcast was ready to declare it a resounding success just yet.
yeah, that's fair. But it is interesting, isn't it? How this game continues to generate so much buzz, even with its, shall we say, extended development cycle.
It's a fascinating phenomenon. And the podcast actually touched upon that too. They were talking about the dedicated Star Citizen community and how for some people it goes beyond just playing a game. It's about buying into a vision, a dream of what this universe could be.
That's a great point. It's like they're invested in the potential, even if the reality isn't quite there yet. And that kind of segues perfectly into our next game, Star Wars Outlaws. Because unlike these titans of the genre, Outlaws is the new kid on the block. And from what you were saying earlier, it sounds like the podcast wasn't completely blown away.
One of the hosts got a chance to play it and, well, let's just say they weren't exactly launching fireworks. Their official review was, it's meh, plus a little something.
Meh plus, that's an interesting way to put it.
Yeah, they seemed to think it had potential, but wasn't quite hitting hyperspace just yet. They went into some specifics, too, about what they felt was lacking.
Oh, really? Like what?
They weren't huge fans of the story, felt a bit predictable, like a lot of other space operas they'd seen before. And while the gameplay was decent, it didn't really break any new ground. They called it a bit safe, especially for a Star Wars game.
That's a shame. So it sounds like Star Wars Outlaws might not be living up to all the hype that usually surrounds a big-name release like that.
That seems to be the consensus so far, yes.
Which is a shame, but also kind of a common experience with games these days, isn't it? The hype machine goes into overdrive, and then the actual game struggles to live up to those sky-high expectations.
It's true. We get so caught up in the trailers, the developer promises, and our own desires for what we want the game to be, that sometimes reality just can't compete.
It makes you wonder if it's even possible for a game to truly live up to the hype, or if we're all just setting ourselves up for disappointment.
That's the big question, isn't it? Maybe it's not even about a game living up to the hype, but more about finding those moments within a game that resonate with us personally.
Finding those little sparks of joy, even if the whole experience isn't perfect. I like that.
Right. Because at the end of the day, those are the things that keep us coming back for more.
It's so
I
true.
mean, think about it. We were just talking about Elite Dangerous and how even something as small as a new ship skin can be really exciting for players.
Yeah, totally.
It's those small details, those little touches that can reignite that passion for a game.
It's about finding that personal connection, that sense of wonder and excitement, even in the smallest things.
Yeah, exactly. And that actually brings us back to something else we were discussing earlier, the enduring appeal of a game like Star Citizen.
Oh, yeah, with the dedicated community and everything.
Exactly. Because for those players, it's not just about the game itself, right?
Right.
It's about being part of something bigger, something that they believe in.
It's about holding on to that hope, that vision of what the game could be.
Precisely. And that's a powerful thing, don't you think?
It really is. It speaks to the power of games, to bring people together, to inspire them, to give them something to believe in, even when, or maybe especially, when the path ahead is uncertain.
I couldn't have said it better myself. It's a testament to the enduring allure of the unknown and the power of shared belief.
Absolutely. And it's something that Guard Frequency seems to understand and appreciate, which is probably why they've cultivated such a dedicated following themselves.
Definitely. They get it. And that's evident in the way they talk about these games, with both passion and a healthy dose of realism.
Okay, but before we go too far down the Star Citizen rabbit hole again,
Uh-huh. Always a risk.
we should probably circle back to Elite Dangerous and their upcoming anniversary. You mentioned earlier that their financial reports were a bit. So, besides a free Sidewinder, what do you think they could do to really get players hyped?
Well, major expansion would be huge, right? New star systems to explore, new ships to fly, new stories to uncover.
Now you're talking. Or maybe some groundbreaking new gameplay mechanics, something completely unexpected.
Ooh, I like where your head's at. They have been known to be unpredictable in the past.
That they have. Though knowing Frontier, they could always just release a new ship paint job and call it a day.
True. True. You never know with them.
But you know what I'm really curious about?
About that.
How they're going to frame this whole anniversary celebration. Will they focus on nostalgia, celebrating the game's history, the community, all that good stuff?
Or will they go the opposite direction and try to look towards the future, highlighting new features, new content, trying to attract new players?
It's a tough balance, for sure. Appealing to the veterans while also enticing newcomers, kind of like trying to navigate through a dense asteroid field, if you ask me.
Very appropriate analogy. And speaking of navigating,
Yeah.
that actually reminded me of something else Guard Frequency touched upon in this episode. They had a whole segment about the challenges of designing a believable and engaging space sim universe.
I bet that's no easy task. It's a delicate balance, right?
Exactly. It's about finding that sweet spot between realism, making players feel like they're exploring a vast and complex galaxy.
Right. You want it to feel authentic.
Exactly. But then you also don't want to bog them down with overly complicated mechanics or make them spend hours upon hours just traveling between star systems.
Ugh, yeah. Nobody wants that. It's a fine line to walk, that's for sure.
It really is. And it's something that all three of these games we've been talking about, Elite, Star Citizen, Outlaws, they all struggle with it to some extent.
It's an ongoing challenge for game developers, finding that perfect balance.
It really is. But, it's also what makes the space sim genre so fascinating, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely.
Because when they get it right, that feeling of freedom, of wonder, of exploration, it's unlike anything else in gaming.
You're preaching to the choir here. There's nothing quite like strapping into your ship, plotting a course through the stars, and just blasting off into the great unknown.
It's the ultimate power fantasy, isn't it? And it's a fantasy that continues to capture the imaginations of gamers all over the world.
I know. I'm hooked.
Me too. There's just something about space,
Mm.
the vastness of it all, the mystery.
The endless possibilities.
Exactly.
Well, I think we've just about reached the end of our own little deep dive into this episode of Guard Frequency.
We covered a lot of ground.
We did, from the latest news in the space sim world to the deeper questions of hype, expectation, and the enduring allure of this amazing genre.
We talked about the challenges of game development, the importance of community, and the power of games to transport us to other worlds.
And who knows, maybe even inspired a few listeners to dust off their joysticks and blast off on some adventures of their own.
Here's hoping.
But before we sign off for today, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought. Something to ponder the next time you fire up your favorite space sim.
I like it. Go on.
Think about what draws you to this particular universe. What are you searching for out there among the stars? What keeps you coming back for more?
Those are great questions. Questions I often ask myself, actually.
Me too. Because ultimately, the answers to those questions are what make these games so personal, so meaningful, and that's really special.
It really is. Okay, I think I'm ready for another deep dive. How about you?
Absolutely, let's do it. So, meh, plus, it is for Star Wars Outlaws. Maybe it'll grow on them, you know? Sometimes games take a while to really click.
Yeah, could be. But it does make you wonder, though, right? That's about the hype. Like
Yeah.
we were saying earlier, sometimes it's just too much for any game to live up to. You get promised the moon and then,
You get, yeah,
yeah,
plus a little something.
pretty much.
Yeah.
But it makes you think, why do some games keep that hype going even when the reality doesn't quite match up?
I guess that loops right back around to Star Citizen, doesn't it?
Totally. People are still pouring their hopes, and let's be honest, their money into that game.
It's that vision thing again, right? Like they're buying into a promise, a future that might not even exist yet.
That's a big part of it, I think. The promise of something truly revolutionary. And with Star Citizen, it's always been about more than just the game itself.
It's a whole community, a movement almost.
Yeah.
People who believe in what it could be, even if they're not playing it yet.
It's kind of remarkable when you think about it. They've built this incredible world around a game that's still technically in development.
It's wild. And you know what else Gart Frequency talked about? This might seem like a jump, but stick with me.
Go for it. I'm intrigued.
They got into this whole thing about Dune, of all things, the books, I mean, specifically about adapting them for the screen.
Ooh, interesting. I'm always up for a good Dune discussion.
Right. So they were debating whether or not the upcoming sequels should bring back Paul Atreides as the narrator, even though that kind of messes with the ending of the first book.
Ah, I see where they're going with this. It's a classic adaptation dilemma, right? Staying faithful to the source material versus making changes to better serve the new medium.
Exactly. And there are strong arguments on both sides. On the one hand, Paul's inner monologue is such a big part of the books. It gives you this incredible insight into his thoughts and motivations.
Totally. It's what makes him such a compelling, albeit kind of messed up character.
Right. But then, on the other hand, bringing him back as narrator for the sequels could undermine that whole arc of him surrendering his prescience and embracing a more uncertain future.
It's a tough one. Because you could argue that by changing the narration, you're essentially changing the story.
Exactly. And that's what makes it such a fascinating debate. Because there's no easy answer. It all comes down to what you prioritize as a storyteller, faithfulness to the original text, or the freedom to reinterpret and reimagine.
And it makes you think about the nature of adaptation itself, right? Is it about simply transferring a story from one medium to another?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it about finding a new way to tell that story, even if it means making some changes along the way?
I don't think there's a right answer, but it's a conversation worth having, especially in today's world where we're seeing more and more book adaptations, and everyone has an opinion about how it should be done.
It's true. Everyone's a critic these days. But that's okay. It shows that people care, right?
Yeah.
That these stories matter to them.
They do, and that's a good thing, even if it leads to some heated debates online.
Oh, for sure. No doubt the Dune subreddits are buzzing about this right now.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what this whole conversation reminds me of?
What's that?
The Elite Dangerous anniversary, actually.
Wait, really? How so?
Well, they're kind of facing a similar challenge, aren't they? Trying to figure out how to stay true to the game's legacy while also moving forward and keeping things fresh for both old and new players.
You're right. It's about finding that balance between honoring the past and embracing the future.
Exactly.
Mm.
And it's not easy,
Mm-hmm.
especially for a game that's been around for a decade and has such a passionate community.
They've got a lot riding on this anniversary update.
They do.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? I'm actually feeling optimistic.
Oh, why is that?
Because based on this guard frequency episode, it sounds like they're asking the right questions. They're thinking about these bigger issues, not just about what ships to release or what systems to add. They're thinking about the soul of the game, what makes it special.
And that's huge.
It is. And ultimately, I think that's what will make or break this anniversary. Not the flashy updates, but whether or not they can capture that magic that made people fall in love with Elite Dangerous in the first place.
That sense of wonder, of exploration, of possibility.
Exactly. If they can do that, then I think Elite Dangerous has a bright future ahead of it.
Here's to hoping. Because, let's be real, the space sim genre needs a win right now.
It does. Between Star Citizen's perpetual development and Outlaw's lukewarm reception, it feels like we need something to get excited about.
We need that next big thing, that game that reminds us why we love exploring the stars in the first place.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
But hey, maybe that's a topic for another deep dive.
Always time for more space sims. Yeah, for sure. I think we've explored just about every corner of this episode.
I think so. I mean, from Elite's Anniversary to Star Citizen's Server Dreams to Dune Talk, it's been a wild ride.
It really has. And you know what it all comes back to? That sense of wonder that keeps us coming back to space sims even when they're being kind of messy.
It's true. There's just something about strapping into a spaceship and blasting off into the unknown that's just magical, you know?
It really is. And I think Guard Frequency gets that. They understand that feeling and they tap into it with their podcast.
Totally. They're not afraid to geek out about the details,
Oh,
but they also don't shy away from the bigger questions, like what makes these games so compelling? What keeps us coming back for more?
exactly. They get it and they make you feel like you're part of the conversation, even if you're not a diehard space sim veteran.
And that's a good point. They've really cultivated a welcoming community around their podcast. It's a place where you can nerd out about your favorite games without judgment.
For sure. And that's something special in this day and age. I feel like everyone's so quick to criticize or tear things down. But Guard Frequency, they're all about celebrating what we love about these games, even with their flaws.
Couldn't agree more. And at the end of the day, isn't that what it's all about? Finding joy in the things that make us happy, connecting with others who share our passions.
Absolutely. So if you're a fan of space sims, whether you're a seasoned veteran or just starting out, do yourself a favor and check out Guard Frequency.
You won't regret it.
We'll drop a link in the show notes so you can start listening right away.
And in the meantime, keep exploring those digital galaxies, my friends. Who knows what wonders you might find out there.
Until next time.